Russia-United States heats up again after U.S. warships enter the Black Sea. Russia calls the U.S. an enemy and U.S. warships stay away from Crimea for their own good. Russia has called the deployment of U.S. warships in the Black Sea a provocation designed to test Moscow's nerves. The United States is our enemy and is doing everything it can to undermine Russia's position on the world stage, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said. We see no other element in their approach. That is our conclusion, he said. The comments suggest that the layer of diplomatic favor generally sought by former Cold War foes in recent decades is thinning. Earlier in March, U.S. President Joe Biden called Russia's Vladimir Putin a murderer and asked Moscow to pay the price for allegations of interference in U.S. elections. Russia has denied these allegations. Russia's deputy foreign minister's remarks suggest people will vigorously reject what he sees as unacceptable U.S. interference in his own backyard. Ryabkov said U.S. military support to Ukraine was a serious challenge for Russia. He went on to accuse the U.S. and NATO of turning Ukraine into a gunpowder keg with increasing arms supplies. However, the U.S. says Ukraine needs a strong army to defend itself against potential Russian aggression. Any threat against us only confirms our belief that our path is the right one, Ryabkov said. There is absolutely nothing American ships can do near our shores. This is purely a provocative act. Provocative in the direct sense of the word. They test our strengths, play with our nerves. They will not succeed, he stressed. The Pentagon declined to discuss placing its ships in the Black Sea and said only that the U.S. military routinely sends ships to the region. Russian President Vladimir Putin blamed the United States, U.S., for what happened in Europe. Relations between Moscow and Washington along with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, are known to be close to the situation in Ukraine. The U.S. is to blame for the escalation of tensions in Europe, Putin said during a speech at the Council of the Russian Defense Ministry. Putin does not deny that the West's actions continue to fuel Russia's concerns. The buildup of U.S. and NATO military forces directly on Russia's borders, and the holding of large-scale exercises, including unplanned ones, raises serious concerns. We are deeply concerned about the deployment of elements of the U.S. global missile defense system near Russia, he said. Putin explained, if NATO infrastructure moves further and emerges in Ukraine, missile flight time will be reduced. If the U.S. and NATO missile systems appear in Ukraine, then their flight time to Moscow will be reduced to 7 to 10 minutes, and with the deployment of hypersonic weapons to 5 minutes, he said. Putin said Russia would take adequate military technical measures in response to hostile measures by the U.S. He stressed that Russia has the right to do so. I want to emphasize. We have the right to do so. We have the right to take measures designed to ensure Russia's security and sovereignty, he said. Russia has published a draft comprehensive agreement on security guarantees between Russia and NATO. At the heart of the draft is to propose a joint commitment to peacefully resolve all disputes involving Moscow and the West. The parties must resolve all international disputes in their mutual relations by peaceful means and refrain from the use or threat of force in any way that is inconsistent with the objectives of the United Nations, Russia said in its proposed agreement. In addition, Russia suggested the establishment of a hotline for emergency contact between the parties. The parties must not create conditions or situations that pose a threat or can be perceived as a threat to the national security of the other part. The draft agreement also outlines dispute resolution mechanisms in certain areas. The parties must maintain dialogue and interaction in order to improve mechanisms for preventing incidents on and on the high seas, especially in the Baltic and Black Sea regions, Russia said. Previously, the U.S. had said it would request 8,500 troops to Ukraine. In a high-alert position, the troops will join other NATO troops in Ukraine. U.S. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said this would send a very clear signal to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. He added, referring to intelligence data, Russia clearly has no intention of reducing the escalation. Yesterday, the U.S. also sent an aircraft carrier, Harry S. Truman, to the Black Sea to join NATO. We ask the U.S. to show maximum responsibility at this time. The risks associated with a possible increase in confrontation should not be underestimated, Ryabkov said. According to him, significant efforts have been made to convince Americans that playing with fire is not in their interest.